Hello everybody, Floppy Waffle 69 here, and welcome back to the channel. Hey, today guys, we are going to be starting off a brand new Down the Line series. This is going to be going down the line of the new Panzerschiff line, which is going to, the Prince Adalbert at tier 10. And this is the first ship in that line, stemming from the Königsberg at tier 5, going to the first ship in the line at tier 6, which is the Deutschland. Obviously a very historic cruiser, and it's very nice to have her finally make her way into World of Warships. Now, obviously, as the time of recording this is update, I believe, 14.9, I want to say. And this is the Liberty Harbor, whatever event that's in the background, the port I'm using. So, but anyways, this is we're still in early access of these Deutschland, or not Deutschland, these Panzerschiffs. So that is why I wanted to go ahead and do these cruisers as the next down the line cruisers, because next update they'll be coming to the game client as free as a tech line ship line that everyone can grind. So they're no longer hidden behind paywalls and anything like that. Obviously by now everyone should have the Deutschland if you've been playing the game for a reasonable amount of time during the event. And obviously some of us are wondering how to play this ship and how this line plays, especially as you go and progress up the tiers. And that's my job here with this Down the Line series. I actually take a deep dive look at each ship. I start in the port screen and I eventually show some gameplay, talk about some tips and tricks that have worked for me, and kind of try to show you kind of like a base foundation of how to build and play the specific ships. So without further ado, let's go on and get into this. So with the new Panzerschiff lines, there is a couple things you have to understand that what this line is trying to do and trying to accomplish. One, these are larger guns for a cruiser, which I believe you're starting right out the gates at 283mm guns. These are the same guns that you find on the Graf Spee, and these are the same guns that you are finding on the Scharnhorst. Now, these guns, though they have less of them, than compared to other cruisers. This, like the Deutschland, for example, is only having 6, and a kind of a weird turret layout too, which is going to be kind of uncomfortable for a lot of players, because inevitably you're going to be having to show a little bit more broadside in order to get off your entire, all your guns to bear, right? And I'll make sure I go ahead and show the turret traverse once we, or the turret firing angles once we get to that specific, I guess, loadout or category here on the right. So it's going to be a little bit awkward for everyone to when they first get in and start playing these ships. It's going to be a little bit awkward to utilize these cruisers. Also, another thing about these ships is they do actually have a Citadel. Shocker, I know, right? Cruisers that can get Citadel, right? These cruisers can and will get Citadel, though they have some plating that I'll go ahead and highlight again when we look at the armor values. Not so much here on the lower tiers of the line, but especially when you get to the higher tiers, you will see that the Citadel plating and all that can work in your favor if you know how to angle and you get the right RNG and luck involved, because let's be honest, there is a lot of luck involved too. But if you angle right to the oncoming shells, you can mitigate a lot of incoming damage and won't just flat out eat citadels like a lot of our other cruisers in the game. And the last thing is the big highlight of this line, obviously, is the manual control of the secondaries. Now, while this is a very cool concept and quite strong if utilized in certain situations, I do want to highlight one glaring weakness of these ships when it comes to the manual secondaries. Usually to get all your secondaries to bear, you are going to be exposing a lot of broadside, and in return you can absolutely get schwacked. So you're going to have to tread cautious with that, or cautiously when utilizing all your secondary mounts. So most of the time you maybe won't be able to do that. You're going to have to be shooting only, like, let's say 75% of the secondaries on that given side, either starboard or basically on either broadside, right? But that being said too and this is the biggest weakness of these ships, is you are only a cruiser with cruiser levels of armor. Yes, you have armor, but at the end of the day, the armor you have is only equivalent to that of a cruiser. You're not having battleship levels of armor, so you can't withstand a lot of focus fire or incoming fire. Like, yes, you have some mitigation with like those fast acting damage control parties, your concealment values, that kind of stuff. But you really don't have, and your maneuverability, of course, but you really don't have the tools required to be a flat out brawler. These ships are going to do pretty damn well in situations where you can mitigate the amount of enemies shooting at your vessel, but the second you're exposed in any amount of open water, these ships will melt, and they will melt very, very fast. So you have to be careful. This isn't like your Schlieffen line. This isn't like your Libertad line, things like that that can just rack up the amount of damage and kind of get away with that taking the incoming damage, right? Can't do that with this. You're going to have to be really smart in your positioning and know when to be more aggressive and when to back up. Just because, and I've said this before a lot on my channel, just because you have those improved secondaries and you are a more of a secondary focused ship doesn't mean we have to, right at the beginning of the battle, get the fuck in there and utilize our secondaries, because usually what happens is you'll end up dead and you'll get first blooded. Usually, okay? So we have to be cautious and take more of a conservative approach and see what the enemy deployment is first before we go ahead and rush in there and utilize our secondaries. In my opinion, these ships are very, very good middle to late game ships, just because by then the amount of enemy ships left on the enemy team has dwindled down to at least half or less. And that's where these ships really, really do excel. When you can isolate targets in these ships, that's when your secondaries will go ahead and melt the opposition or the enemy ship. That is where they are best. They are not very good in the beginning of the game, okay? Unless you have the support of your allies, like allied smoke screens or allied cover, you're really not going to get that much out of these ships in the beginning of the battle. And I've seen the biggest mistake I've seen these players or newer players making when they play these ships is that they're being way, way, way too aggressive in the beginning of the battle. Let the battle develop first. See the flank, see the enemy deployment, and then make your decision based upon those things. Don't just rush on in there. So, all right. All right, let's get into the actual statistics of the ship, and then we'll go ahead and show some gameplay on the ship as well. So first, we're going to start with survivability. This is clocking at 31,400 with a torpedo protection or damage reduction of 22%, which again isn't bad for the tier, right? Armor layout, and this is kind of what I was talking about. At the end of the day, look, you still only have 25 millimeters of nose, 25 millimeters of ass. Again, your deck is only 25 millimeters, and if we go and shave away some of that extra armor plating or that torpedo protection and bulges, you can see your citadel is well above the waterline. So you're going to have to tread cautiously because these ships can and will get punished. Also, we do have the infamous shell catcher here on the rear, so if we are kiting away, we will eat a lot of AP pens going right there through the step-up deck, so you have to be careful with that too. Again, when we're showing the right amount of angle with our artillery, that is going to expose that citadel, making it easy for especially large caliber ships, battleships and whatnot, to go ahead and strike right into our citadel and do devastating amount of damage to us. Now, another big weakness when it comes to this ship, unlike the Graf Spee, which is the tier 6 premium version, really sought after premium, I might add, is the Graf Spee at least gets a heal. You do not get a heal on the Deutschland. You're going to have to be careful and even use a little bit more cautiousness when picking those spots in engagement and trading HP. Ships that specialize in secondary combat but don't have a heal, they are going to struggle inevitably, just because the more damage they take. I understand with adrenaline rush it's going to buff the ship, but it's going to make them weaker in the fact that they're going to have less HP to trade, and inevitably when they're getting those brawling situations, it's not necessarily hard for ships to hit you, right? So you're going to have to be careful, and again, understand where the battle's developing and pick your spots wisely. Okay, going to the artillery, and I will go ahead and right away show it the artillery firing angles or the turret firing angles. You can see that they're not the best. Obviously, you're going to expose a fair amount of broadside in order to get these turrets off. So sometimes you're going to have to be shooting that one turret, which is going to suck. It's going to feel rather anemic. But understand that that is kind of a balancing factor for what these ships bring. Where they lack in the main battery amount of shells or volume of shells, they make up with the amount of secondaries that the ship has, and that you can manually control them finally, instead of relying on an automated system to hopefully hit the target for you. The main battery, these are the 2x3 283 millimeter guns. These are similar to the guns you see, like I said already, on the Scharnhorst, on the Graf Spee. Should feel right at home. You are reloading these in 19.5 seconds. That is a fairly long reload. Graf Spee is coming in at 20. Though we're not at battleships levels of reload, with maybe 30 seconds. Still, it's going to feel, especially for a cruiser, pretty anemic to go ahead and utilize this, especially when you realize that your dispersion is not the best, and you're not going to be landing that many shells on target, and it's really going to be a flip of a coin whether or not your shells go where you want them, let alone hit the target. So understand that when you're playing these ships as well. Again, your 180-degree turn time is going to be 27.7 seconds, especially with the build that I have in the commander build. And again, your maximum range is 15.8 kilometers, which is, again, at tier 6, should be pretty comfortable, though you do not have access to the spotter plane. So what you get is what you get, 15.8. You're going to have to make use of that. So especially, you can already see, no heal, armor is pretty meh, 15.8 kilometer range, that double up tier, it's going to be a bit of a yikes, right? Good luck trying to utilize your secondaries when you're in a tier 7 game. Though you still can, or tier 8 game, though you still can, you're just going to have to pick your spots even more cautiously, even more wisely, before we go ahead and rush in there and utilize our secondaries. Again, what I'm trying to say is, the beginning of the battle, you're going to be more artillery focused rather than your secondary focus, because if you try to utilize your secondaries within the game, I'm telling you, you will get eaten alive by enemy battleships. So you're going to have to be careful. I'm talking about the high explosive shells first, and I do believe that these shells do fall in line with the Germans. You do get that quarter penetration mechanic. That's going to allow us to get 71 millimeters of armor penetration capabilities. The damage of the HE is 3,200, and you have a 20% chance to start a fire. Again, the shell velocity at 910 meters a second is pretty comfortable. So I will point that out. Again, with your fires per minute, if I go to the Deutschland, which I don't understand why it's doing that, but whatever. Your fires per minute on the Deutschland are not the best, obviously, as you can assume, just based upon your slow reload and a limited amount of shells going down range. You're only getting about 3.7 fires a minute, which rather sucks. Even though the fire chance seems high, again, you only have 6 shells potentially going down range, and most times you only have 3, right? So going to the armor piercing, this is nice though for the big caliber guns here. 7,600 on your maximum damage, again matching the same shell velocity or initial velocity as the HE at 910 meters a second. Again, these ships try to, again, these pocket battleships, Panzer ships, they really do specialize in eliminating enemy cruisers, so that should be your primary focus when it comes to your main artillery. Though these guns can pack a punch on a enemy battleship's broadside, so definitely make use of that as well. I would say you're probably shooting AP 80, 90% of the time. There are going to be those few times that you should switch to HE. Again, just because you have larger caliber guns on a cruiser doesn't mean you just have to shoot AP all the time. But again, I would highly recommend it just because your damage is so good, your armor piercing is so good, that you could probably get away with doing that more often than not. Again, if you're heavily, you're fighting a heavily armed target, bow-in battleship, of course you're going to want to switch to the HE, because pinpointing the superstructure with these guns is definitely a task, and I wouldn't recommend it, right? All right, going to the bread and butter of why you would play these lines, okay? Obviously, you're going to build for secondaries, because if you're not building for secondaries, in my opinion, when it comes to this particular line, there isn't really a reason to be playing this line, okay? So obviously, you have 2 types of guns for the secondaries. You have the 150s and you have the 105s. Both get the quarter pen mechanic, so I wanted to point that out right out the gates. And then with the secondaries, you are reloading in around 5.6 seconds. Your maximum range, automatic wise, base is 6.7, and then while you're controlling them manually, you do get quite a little bit of a bonus there with the 7.3. Go ahead and slot our commander. You can see that the automated range of the guns is going to be 8.1, and then the maximum range of the manual mode is going to bring us to 8.7. Now we go ahead obviously and slot the secondary flag signal, which you should be doing on all your secondary focused battleships and or cruisers now, and that's going to bump you up even more. I believe you can get it out, is it 9.1 kilometers for the maximum manual mode, and then for the automatic should be 8.5 kilometers, I'm pretty sure. So again, nice, at least we have that, especially at tier 6. That is super nice to have. Again, your penetration on your 105s is going to be the 26 millimeters, and on your 150s, you're going to get that 38 millimeters, which is super nice. Those are two important thresholds that you want to be able to cross. The 26 being mainly for cruisers, and then the 38 being for your battleships. That is super nice as well. Again, they are 875 meters a second. And then your smaller ones, your 105s, are 900 meters a second. Again, should feel fairly comfortable leading the shells appropriately in order to hit the target. Though it is a little bit wonky, and you'll see that when we get into the gameplay, when you're looking at the reticle trying to lead the target with your secondaries, it can be a little confusing. So I'm definitely going to want to make sure I highlight some tips that have helped me out to land the vast majority of my secondary shells on target, especially when I'm manually controlling it. My advice to you is when you're pushing to that maximum range of where your automated secondaries can hit, I would almost prefer you just leave it automated at those ranges, because the likelihood of you hitting and landing those shells on target, especially if you're a newer player to the line, is so slim that you actually have a greater chance if the automated, basically the computer does it for you. I have fought multiple newer players, especially the ones that whale their way up to the tier 9 and tier 10. During the early access event, and they're trying to hit me at 12.5, 13 kilometers with their manual secondaries, and they are nowhere close to my vessel, and it's so easy to dodge. So again, when you push to those further ranges based upon the tier you're playing, like tier 6, tier 7, tier 8, wherever your maximum range is for your automated, let the automated take over, and I'm sure you're going to land more shells on target than you would if you were controlling it manually. Okay, just my advice. Okay, going to the torpedoes. Oh, well, I guess I should probably talk again about the secondaries. Obviously, there should be no surprise that you have the highest secondary hitting DPM when it comes to tier 6. It should be no surprise at this point. I mean, your secondary DPM is 192,000, and then your actual hitting DPM is 66,000. Very, very nice. Especially when you're manually controlling the secondaries. Of course, you're going to have actual higher hitting DPM just because it's you physically aiming your shells, right? So I did want to point that out. I wanted to make sure I didn't miss that when you're reading these numbers. Obviously, you guys can go to Ship Tool 2, play around with it, and see some of these statistics on certain vessels that you play or that you've been facing to kind of understand what it's like to play against them, or what the enemy captains have, or what they're thinking when they're building their ships. It's definitely, the more you know, right, is what I'm trying to say. Definitely go ahead and check that website out if you haven't already. Okay, now going into the torpedoes, and I will go ahead and show the torpedo firing angles. And again, you're seeing that they are kind of forward mounted, or not forward mounted, but they are forward firing to some degree, but where they're positioned on the ship kind of cuts and limits the angle. You are going to be exposing some broadside, or more broadside than you would like, in order to get these torpedoes off, especially in brawling situations. So keep that in mind, especially if the enemy is doing a flyby and waiting to shoot underneath your front turret, because they can definitely do that before you can get your torpedoes off if you don't play the angle correctly. Obviously your torpedoes have about 100-second reload time, 8-kilometer range, 13,700 maximum damage with 65 knots, with a detectability range of 1.3. One thing I like to highlight with these ships, and this comes into a lot of brawling ships in general, I find players launching their torpedoes way too early. Just because, for example, I get within 8 kilometers and I see an enemy battleship is clearly coming on to brawl me and head-on engage me, why would I launch my torpedoes at 8 kilometers? Like, yes, I understand if you only have like 9,000, 8,000 HP left, and there's a good chance he's just going to overmatch you. Yeah, I understand the reason why you would do that, but why not take a salvo or two, get into a closer range of 4 kilometers? Definitely, when you're reading the white indicator or realizing his ship movement or where he's going to go, when you're anticipating it, launch it then, where you know you're going to assure yourself landing the max amount of torpedoes on target, rather than potentially missing your entire rack, and now you're forced to flip your ship around to the other side and then launch your torpedoes. Definitely try to play it more smart, or smarter than the enemy, and that is one mistake I cannot say enough. That I've seen it so many times, guys. So please don't just fire torpedoes at maximum range. Wait to get in a little bit closer till you have the right angles. Time it to their reload. Once they shoot, then go ahead and swivel open and release those torpedoes, guys. A defense is not really worth talking about. Your A is pretty ass, but especially when you get to the higher tiers of 9 and 10, your A can get a little bit formidable. Again, nothing deterring wise, but because you're usually taking the in slot 6, that main AA and secondary mod 3, which is also going to be inevitably buffing your AA, right? Your AA can get a little trolly at times for the enemy CV. So, but down here at these tiers, pretty much irrelevant. Going into the maneuverability of the ship, and I just want to make sure I find it. It looks like we have a maximum speed of 28 knots, which makes you the slowest cruiser at tier 6. And yes, you will definitely notice that, guys. Rudder shift time of 8.7 and a turning circle radius of 680 meters. The ship doesn't handle particularly well, but in my opinion, in that 4th slot, I'm going to be taking damage control party because your ship doesn't already handle very well anyways. Buffing the rudder shift isn't going to help mitigate any incoming damage, or very low chances of mitigating that incoming damage. You'd be better off doing the damage control and having those floods and fires get out on your ship quicker would just be my 2 cents with it. So going into the concealment of the ship, it looks like you have a base of 12.3, and then if you go ahead and slot your commander, if you happen to choose the concealment expert skill, you can get it down to 11 point something. In my opinion, I'm not taking concealment expert on this ship just because I feel like those 4 points I can allocate to other parts of my ship that I want to buff. Again, this is personal preference. This is just me. I think if I leave my concealment at 12.3, I can make use of certain commander skills, which is going to help buff my reload rather than you concealment to try to get in there a little bit closer and sneakier. I mean, tier 6, let's be honest, there are subs and CVs flying around and diving around everywhere. You're really not going to make use of your concealment value at lower tiers anyways. I mean, basically in the game as it is right now anyways, but especially at lower tiers because I think tier 6 is where a lot of players want to play their aircraft carriers because it's a good introductory tier usually, better than tier 4 where CVs usually suck ass. Tier 6 is a good introductory tier for aircraft carriers and they finally feel like they're actually doing something. So just keep that in mind when you're building, your commander on your ship, right? So, but anyways, guys, that is the Deutschland in a nutshell. My opinion on the Deutschland is this. Clearly, the Graf Spee is just better, in my opinion. The heel allows a lot more flexibility, and a lot more survivability, and the guns just feel a little bit more comfortable on that particular ship. But that being said, the Deutschland has its strengths. And the strengths come fighting against isolated targets and ships you want to sail in a straight line, especially DDs that are open water gunboating you within your manual secondary range, which is, I don't understand, especially when they're coming at you. I've seen that happen multiple times. Personally, I'd rather play another cruiser, but this ship, in my opinion, is definitely not the strongest. It has its strengths. I understand that, and I acknowledge that, but I don't find her that strong compared to the rest of the line when we go ahead and get down to those ships. At the end of the day, we are only a tier 6 super cruiser, Panzer ship, right? It's nothing, that impressive, right? And it shouldn't be, as it is here down in tier 6, and theoretically, you can go against tier 5s and whatnot. So there is a little bit of a balancing feature going on there. But anyways, guys, that is the Deutschland. So let's go ahead and check out some gameplay of her. Alrighty guys, and here we are in battle with the Deutschland, and I realized I forgot to show the upgrades and the captain skills, so here you are right here in the top left of your screen. Obviously the build is pretty straightforward. Obviously I want to maximize my secondaries and my main guns as well to some degree, but mainly the bread and butter is those secondaries. I'm going ahead and taking Superintendent as well because I like an extra charge of either my damage control party and my hydroacoustic search, and then obviously for the shell switcher or the whatever shell switching skill, I always forget the name. I want to make sure that I take that as well to decrease the, time it takes to switch shells. Again, the build is pretty self-explanatory, and you can definitely understand where I'm going for with it. I don't have a very high-level commander, but that is definitely the build that I'm going to be running, and going and working towards basically to get once I get a 21-point commander on this particular ship. This is not my Graf Spee commander. It is a separate commander because on my Graf Spee, I don't min-max the secondaries on that particular ship, though again that's a topic for a different video or for a separate video if you want to do that, or maybe one day if I want to fuck around and give it a try. Also, another thing I forgot to mention about the main battery when it comes to the Deutschland, which is again you really won't even I won't even notice it, but it is worth talking about, like the number wise of the thing, is that your sigma value is actually 2.15, again, which sigma is just the consistency of the shells to land in the ellipse. And again, when you only have 6 shells and your dispersion is already shit, that's most likely why they are I guess raising it just a little bit. Again, just because you hear a higher sigma value doesn't translate that it's more accurate, because it certainly isn't. I can only assume Wargaming is or has done this is because they know people in that second slot is going to or are going to put the secondary battery modification in that slot, and they realize that their main battery at that point is going to be shit, so they want to try to make it a little less shit and actually land on the target to some degree. Again, for me, I did play this ship, of course, you know me. I did play this ship with taking the aiming systems mod in that 3rd slot, and I will say the main battery did feel not terrible, actually. But again, to me, it kind of defeated the purpose for why you would build or play these ships if you're not going to be speccing into the secondaries, right? Might as well just be playing another cruiser line, for example. So that's kind of why, and my justification for why I actually opted for the secondary build. Plus, the secondaries are pretty damn good. I don't know why you wouldn't build into them. Plus, it's a fun play style too, especially here at Tier 6 where things are a little bit less stressful. It's definitely worth playing these ships, I think, to give it a go and see if you like them or whatnot. So obviously, one of my first tips that I would recommend is that, yes, it's kind of a weird combination because I don't think your ship by any means is an island humping ship. I actually consider the ship to be more of an open water ship anyways, but when utilizing the secondaries, the ship can, and I've seen a lot of players do it too, including myself, definitely utilize islands to mitigate the amount of shells that can be fired at you. Plus, you can lob your secondary shells over the island at times and really, literally just let it rain on the enemy ship that's behind the other island, kind of like in Atlanta. That's what I like to kind of compare it to when it comes to its secondary shells firing on target. Though you have to be careful. I think it's the 105s have the higher shell velocity, but the 150s can lob a little bit more. So they're like 800 and something meters a second, whereas like the 105s are like 900, I believe. I can't remember exactly off the top of my head. So. But you can kind of see that the main battery is not very reliable. I'm usually landing 1, maybe 2 shells out of 6 when I fire all 6. And if I fire 1 turret, maybe I'm landing 1. It's just something you're going to have to deal with while playing the ship and understand that your main battery is just not very good. These are definitely secondary focused cruisers through and through. And that's why you're playing them, right? Because we want to make sure we utilize those juicy secondaries and get those on the target, causing fires and actually just causing raw damage too. Like, one thing I've noticed about these ships, again, it's because you can manually control them, but again, couple that with your quarter penetration mechanic that the Germans get. The secondaries do a fair amount of damage if you can land them. That is the point that I'm trying to make, is landing your secondary battery shells. Obviously, when the enemy cruiser is slightly angled, like the Hobart is here, you get the citadels. When the ship is flat broadside to you, like the Emerald was about a couple minutes ago, you get nothing but overpens. This is going to be a very frustrating shell when it comes to its armor piercing, so you're going to have to make you understand that and realize that just because I have a cruiser broadside doesn't mean it's always going to guarantee a citadel for me. Obviously, your fuse time is 0.033 seconds, and your AP threshold is 47 millimeters. You can kind of see how the shells can go right through those lightly armored cruisers and get nothing but sadly on overpens. But the second those lightly cruisers angle to you, that is when you're going to get those juicy citadels. Kind of a weird mechanic. It's kind of punishing cruiser players for doing what they should be doing, which is angling. I know this has been a discussion that I've talked about in the past, and a lot of other content creators have talked about as well. And it is something that I would like to see wargaming address to some degree. It would be nice, but again, I wouldn't bank on it, because as long as we have as much overmatch in the game as possible and we have battleship players running the show, I don't really think they're going to be addressing it that much until maybe cruisers, but end up like how olden days RTS CVs ended up, which is hardly anyone played them. Then maybe they'll be forced to do like a cruiser rework or something. But again, I don't think we're at that stage. I'm just speculating and talking nonsense at that point. But it would be nice to make a change. So again, this was a smaller game, so the odds are kind of stacked in my favor to some degree, because less targets that can shoot me is where these ships are going to excel. Obviously, we are going to get into a brawling situation, and this is a very, very good clip to show you what this ship can do if played right. Obviously, the angling, knowing how much profile to show my broad ship, knowing situational awareness, or having situational awareness to know the targets where they are around me, and knowing which targets to shoot at, right? Obviously, this is where you'd utilize your manual secondaries to hit specific parts of the ship to get those full pens and get those fires lit on specific parts of the ships as well. Notice how I haven't fired my torpedoes either, because I want to wait until I get to the part where I know my torpedoes are going to land on target. Obviously, the Dunkirk only having 320 millimeter gun, somewhere around there. I know he can't overmatch me, so with my 25 millimeter nose, so it's like the one few battleships I can actually take advantage of and make sure that I can angle correctly and know that I can get in close without him overmatching me and schwacking me and citadeling me through my nopes. Again, this is where your ship excels, is when you get into these brawling situations, using those manual secondaries, utilizing those torpedoes. And again, if the Vikeli here, or the Proctor, or whatever the hell, is going to not honor me at all, I can go absolutely citadel with my main battery guns. These are still 283 millimeter guns, so yeah, by all means, take advantage of it, right? But again, having my head on a swivel, knowing where the enemy threats or the potential threats are, so I can angle my ship accordingly, so that I don't get surprisingly butt fucked here by the New Mexico either. Obviously, what killed me here, or what will kill me, is the enemy submarine, because he lands torpedoes on me and there's really nothing I can do at this point. And then the Kotovsky is basically just able to shoot a broadside Deutschland, just because he is having to honor the enemy torpedoes coming his way, which even torpedoes that are shotgun fired can still cause flooding and incapacitations, which really does suck. So you have to keep that in mind as well. But yeah, as you can see, homing torpedoes, right? Not fun at all. And I've had other games too. This thing doesn't dodge torpedoes incredibly well because it doesn't handle very well. So that hydroacoustic search is going to be crucial when it comes to seeing incoming threats and making sure you dodge them accordingly. Another thing about the Deutschland that I forgot to mention is you do have access to the hydroacoustic search, and the ship acquisition range is 5.5 kilometers, which is nice. So that's equivalent to like that of like the Low Yang and whatnot. So that can help you, potentially charge incoming smoke screens or spot incoming torpedoes. And take advantage of that, right? So obviously the manual secondaries here, shooting against submarines, are super nice, just because it allows me to aim and hit the target where I want to hit it. Obviously my ASW accuracy is rather poor, because I guess I put it way too far ahead of him and he happened to turn right, which rather sucks. So, and that pretty much concludes our game here in the Deutschland, which does suck. I thought it was a fun game, definitely high octane there at the end, but yeah, definitely painful, because I think we end up losing this game too, which, when you have low tier BB players that really don't understand the game or what the situation is, though I will say 2 of them know what they're doing, the other 2 are just painfully bad, which is kind of a crapshoot. It's what you're going to have when you have a free-to-play game, right? So, but while we watch the game conclude here at the end, I will go ahead and just do my final thoughts on the Deutschland for you guys. The Deutschland can be incredibly fun. And again, the Deutschland isn't a good example of what this line is capable of doing. It's just an introductory to the line at tier 6. Imagine taking this and putting it at steroids when you get to the tier 9, especially the tier 10, which is the Prince Adalbert. The ship line is going to be fun, and it's going to be a fun down the line series to do. But I understand that a lot of my opinions are a little bit controversial, just because it comes down to the actual ability to utilize these secondaries. I mean, you see a lot of these YouTubers, that say, oh, these ships are fucking phenomenal. Well, look at this damage, 283, 300,000 damage games. Like, that's incredible. That's awesome. But what is the average WoW's player going to be able to accomplish in these things? And the answer is get dev struck within the first 5 minutes, because they're trying to mimic that of those players, and it's just not going to happen. Again, it's the only way you're going to get better. I'm not defending it. Again, you should learn from your mistakes, but these ships are very, very prone to blowing up fast and early. And I've seen it happen multiple times. Matter of fact, I actually love seeing these kind of ships on the enemy team, because I know exactly what they're going to do, and I know exactly what their play style is, so I know I can plan accordingly and plan around them. Very, very easy to plan around. And again, you see a lot of players using Lucians at tier 9 and tier 10, and of course it's going to make those ships substantially better, especially when it comes to their secondaries. So my other thought about these ships are that they actually aren't bad when it comes to eliminating enemy cruisers. The problem is the amount of angle you're having to show. That does not change until tier 9 and tier 10 based upon turret arrangements, because I believe you have that 1 and 2 turret either on the nose and the ass of the ship, which is going to make it pretty awkward to utilize. So that's going to be a little bit of a learning curve too, just because most players are used to having the front, 2 front turrets of like 3, for example, or God forbid, just 2, and all you have is 1 turret of 3. So again, if you get your 1 turret incapacitated, you're basically solely reliant on your secondaries because your turret is not responding, right? So that's another big disadvantage. The more guns you have per turret is kind of a disadvantage to some degree, is just because the second you get in those situations when enemies are able to knock it out, it's cutting hard into your DPM and your ability to trade, which is what you will see again when you climb up the higher tiers. I don't believe this turret arrangement changes until tier 9, because you have at tier 8 the kind of clone of the shill, which has again the same 2 turret arrangements, which I don't know if they keep the 283mm guns at that tier. I can't remember off the top of my head, but definitely I know for a fact the turret arrangement is still the same. And of course you can only imagine that your amount of secondary batteries the amount of secondary battery you have will only increase as you slowly climb up the tiers and up the tech tree, right? So but yeah, guys, that is basically the Deutschland in a nutshell. The ship I found would be fun, but then frustrating, but then fun, but then frustrating. It's one of those ships that I don't think is very consistent just because of the play style alone. It's very reliant on the amount of enemy team, shooting at you, the amount of turrets shooting at you, guns shooting at you, and then where you spawn. I think this is a very spawn-heavy ship as well, and map-heavy ship. The more island coverage, probably the better for this thing, just because it can make use of that and really mitigate the amount of incoming fire towards it. But if you find yourself in like ocean, for example, a very open map, yeah, the artillery is going to feel comfortable, but there's just no way in hell you're going to be able to make use of the secondaries, because in order to get that close, you're just going to get absolutely dummied by enemy battleships. So, but yeah, guys, that is the battle. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, whatever it takes, right? And I will continue trickling out videos of this down the line series. So in the comment section, be civil. Let's have a discussion and, debate about certain topics of the ship, because this is definitely a interesting line, to say the least. So anyways, guys, thank you for watching. I will leave you with the post battle screen, and I will see you all in the next one. Have a good day, and peace out.